Well, I'm so glad you're going to be participating. I'm having the most incredible experience doing the telesummit. I've been interviewing people all over the country, and I'm so excited that I'm interviewing you. And I just want to introduce everyone who's listening to this telesummit. I want to welcome my dean. She works at the College of Nursing, and she works at the University of Florida, and she has been an inspiration in my life and an incredible leader. And she is a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing, and she has been involved in nursing for a very long time. And what she brings to the table today is she has such a spirit of positivity and a spirit of great energy, and she's been an inspiration to me. And I'm so excited that you're joining us today so you can share what your vision, as we all are celebrating the 2020 decade of the nurse and midwife. We're at a time of almost a threshold where there's a turning point in time with all the current events that are happening in our lives as nurses are in the front line. And now we realize how valuable, the whole world is realizing how incredibly valuable nursing is in playing its part and being there as caregivers during this time. So I'm so honored to talk to you about how you see we can come out of this time as a turning point and what we can create for the future for nurses, what the visions are, and what are the most important next steps that we have to take to move into the future.
Wow. We have been experiencing something that none of us has ever known before. At least not in America, not the United States, but even all over the world. That this spirit of well, there is a spirit of fear, actually, but that fear it's brought us together quite in an odd way. It has brought all of us together because we had to give up some of our own individual freedoms in order to give to others the gift of life, actually. Because if we had not done this, even more people would have been affected by this and would have died. Of course, and we're not done yet. We don't know what the future is going to bring. And of course, I'm not sure that, I've never lived through such a period of uncertainty. I'm sure there have been periods of uncertainty that were even greater than what we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
World War II, different kinds of sentinel events that we've all heard about. But the uncertainty that we're facing now is unprecedented.
And I hear the theme with the speakers is that from this place, we're moving from, what do we have to sacrifice? Our freedom and our individuality come together as a collective. And that seems to be something that's emerging in all the how do we come together? What does it look like when we come together? How do we create that circle where we can become stronger and become more effective in our in the collective?
Exactly. And I was just explaining to our faculty
Mm-hmm.
that one of the things that I think is an important characteristic for nurse leaders is a high tolerance for ambiguity.
Yes.
A high tolerance for ambiguity. But that, I realized as I've been thinking about this and reflecting, that that notion, the reason people can have high tolerance for ambiguity, and not all nurses can, by the way. Nurses like to have the
Right.
boxes. We like the boxes checked, but nurse leaders have realized that the boxes might box us in.
Mm-hmm.
So we embrace ambiguity. But ambiguity assumes that there's a right way. And if I work hard enough and I think hard enough, and if I get the right people in the room and I do all this, the right way will be revealed to me. And then the ambiguity will fall away. But what we're facing now is not ambiguity. It's downright uncertainty. There may not be an answer, no matter how hard we look. There may not be an answer that will be revealed to us.
Right.
So how do we cope with that? We can't really tolerate that. That wouldn't be rational to say, oh well, I'll just have to get used to it. That's not rational. We're not. I don't think, at least nurses are wired up that way to just say, well, I guess I can't do anything about it. I'll just have to get used to it. That's not what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Because what it takes is another thing that nurses really do have, a characteristic that I think nurses have, and that is courage.
Yes.
If you ask the general person on the street who interacts with nurses,
Yeah.
don't you think nurses are courageous? They would be like, courageous? Really? Because it's such a part of our being that we don't bring it up. It's just
It's
what we
true.
are.
It's so true. I got goosebumps because I remember so many times when something really not okay was happening, and we face it all the time when we're taking care of families and we're in clinical practice or wherever we are. We bravely walk into situations, make an assessment, look around. What can we do? So you are right.
And
Nurses are truly courageous.
it takes courage to face those situations that we don't know what the outcome is going to be.
That's right.
We have to sometimes, a lot of times, we have to act in a way that's counterintuitive or that's difficult. It would be easier to just to let this go, right?
Right.
But that's not, we can't do that. We
No.
can't do that because we put ourselves out there, and our needs as an individual take a lower precedent. We choose for our needs to take a lower precedence than our others. And I don't know, it's been many, many years. And you probably have seen this because I know your background, but I wrote up a conceptualization of what I thought caring was.
Yeah.
A caring, and caring, in my estimation, caring is investing oneself and one's resources. Now, those can be emotional, those can be intellectual, those can be physical, those can be financial, into another for the sole good of that other. Now, that could be another person. It could be your profession. It can be your family. It doesn't have to be an individual, but there's some other. And you willingly, consciously, intentionally give that up to that other entity so that that other entity can thrive, can improve, can become optimized. And that's what nurses do. And I do think it's intentional. We may be unaware of it at any one point in time. We may kind of work automatically, but it isn't that it's like cavalier. We because we're nurses, we do intend to do that investment. So
I think you're absolutely right, and it's unbelievable that you're naming it. You're naming what we do when we do put the thriving and the good and the you know, how can we help another human being by utilizing ourselves, our resources, and everything we can do for that other human being. And I've seen it over and over and over again, and we're seeing it now in the world that they are brave. They are going towards they're going towards the problem with courage and being brave. And you know, it's so powerful that you name that, and we recognize that we as professionals do that.
and it's not just another individual. It's not just another human being. It can be a group. It can be an idea.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of nurses, you know, I used to, you mentioned that I've done this for a long time. I used to teach some courses where we talked about the history of nursing.
Right.
And was it Clara Moss?
Right.
Clara Moss took the, she gave her life actually for an idea that the yellow fever immunization would save people's lives.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was Clara Moss.
Tell me the story.
Well, I mean, she was in the Spanish-American War,
Right.
and I would be terribly embarrassed if it really wasn't Clara Moss.
We'll re-edit it.
She was in, yeah, edit out every time I say her name. In the Spanish-American War, down in Cuba, more soldiers were dying of disease, of yellow fever, than war injuries.
Right.
And they thought that they had a vaccine. They thought they had a cure. I mean, like, this is kind of giving me chills to think that
Yeah.
we're kind of there now, that we're trying to get this vaccine. And she volunteered to receive the vaccine. Then she volunteered to be to get yellow fever, and she died. But what they learned about the vaccine saved hundreds of, well, it saved all of us. I mean, when's the last time you heard of somebody dying of yellow fever?
Unbelievable.
So
I just feel that, and I can feel that energy in nurses. I can feel that energy in me when you say something like that. I think there's something about those that are called to nursing are called by something deep inside themselves that really is, when we find ourselves in those positions of how we can save others.
yes, and even ideas. Just think of all the people who have put themselves out because of the idea, because of a concept, because of an
Right.
idea. We have lots, you know, we have examples of that in nursing all the time. That people, you know, the thing I can think of in the most recent is universal health care or health disparities. Nurses, not nurses name that. They're like, no, it's not right. It's not right, and I'm going to do something about it. That's not that they're doing something about it for an individual. They're doing it because of the idea, because of the concept, because of the ethos, if you want to call it that, because of the value of what is right and wrong.
So I think in the future, what I'm hearing you say is because we name it, because we're willing to be courageous, we can name what's wrong in the system, and we are willing to sacrifice, you know, things so we can make it right. And you know that, like the health disparities or universal health care, you know, we're willing to accept the consequences of those decisions for the better outcome for all. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I think so, because of a belief system that we hold. Not everybody's is the same, of course, but
Yes.
and not everybody is willing to make the same sacrifice.
Exactly.
But I believe nurses, I tell students, I tell everybody that comes into nursing that somewhere deep down inside, you are in this profession to make a difference, in someone's life, to make a difference in, um, to make your mark. Now, it doesn't have to be a real showy thing. Think of all the nurses that we're hearing stories about right now with this COVID, with all the sacrifices that are being made. Some of them are not even going to see their families. They're isolating themselves with their families because of the sacrifice they're making for others.
Yeah.
But they're not doing that for accolades. They're doing it because they have to, because they can't not do it. Yeah. That's
Exactly.
how you know something is your value, that you really value it, because you can't ignore it.
Exactly.
Can't not do it.
Exactly. That reminds me of a story that when I was in the Middle East, how there were nurses going through a war zone day after day to take care of patients because no one else would go, and they weren't even getting paid for what they were doing. They were just doing it because there was no one else to do and provide the care that they were going to provide these people. And I just thought that was so, there's so many heroes of people walking into the war zone like what we're doing right now. How do you see the evolution of nursing in education in the future? Where do you see it evolving to in like a decade from now? How do you see things being different if you think out of the box?
In education?
Yeah, in educating nurses, because the nurses we educate, as we're educating the future nurses. So tell me about what you would see as a dean of a college of nursing. I know in the moment we are expanding and changing and evolving as we're speaking, but where do you see the evolution might continue to go in, let's say in 5 years?
I can't predict the future that way, but I can kind of, from a global standpoint.
Yeah.
Now, the reason 2020 is being celebrated as it is, it's Florence Nightingale's 200th birthday this year, in a couple of weeks, actually. So when you think about nursing at that time, nursing was totally driven by values, by commitment. It was oftentimes delivered by people in religious orders. And so the nursing and a person's values and beliefs were so intertwined that was sort of the predominant. And then this century comes along, and we see that, at least in the Western cultures, that knowledge, science, the received view is valued. I could get into gender politics with this, but I won't. All right, I will. Women.
Well,
women were seen as the nurturing, as the caring, and that it was their duty. That it was, and if you there was something unseemly about being paid what you were worth, or even thinking that you should be paid what you were worth, and that was sort of all encapsulated in the gender roles that we believed in at that particular point in time.
I agree.
And then as the science and the more what we've learned, what we identify more as a masculine view of the world view of the gender politics that would go along with that, became more and more important.
Right.
So, and more valued in the Western cultures, not necessarily in other cultures of the world, but in the Western cultures. So what we saw in nursing, and I think you and I went to nursing school pretty contemporaneously,
Right.
is that there was sort of a minimization of the caring piece
Mm-hmm.
and an emphasis totally on the knowledge piece, the knowledge, the science, the and that was very much a black and white thing. You know, there was a certain way to do it, and the reason was this, and you know that. So that was sort of the where we saw ourselves, and that's where we are. You know, we're sort of like emerging from that now.
Yes.
What I see is those two coming together. That's what I'm hoping for the next 5, 10 years down the road.
That's fantastic.
Because look where we're at today. The science is way behind. The science can't keep up with the needs to stop this pandemic, right?
Exactly.
And so what are we seeing that we're having to do? It's the values piece, it's the courage, it's that part coming to the forefront. But it's partnering, right? Because we don't just want to take care of people till they die. We want to stop them from dying. So we're seeing this partnership um, in how society is addressing this issue.
Right.
And I see nursing, you know, having this ability to move those two aspects together. It's not an either or. It can't be.
Right.
It
It's a
can't.
both and. It's a both and. So
And
what I hear you saying, which is really great, I hear a couple things. One, as we move forward in the future, is honor the courage that we have, and we have to be courageous and brave as we move forward in the future to be able to. One of our strengths are we are willing to do what it takes to care for another human being, and that requires courage. And to keep that courage and name that courage and feel the power of who we are because of that, we have courage. The other thing I hear you saying is the partnerships, how we can move into the future with the partnerships that have evolved. And also I hear you talking about how we bring the masculine and the feminine aspects, the science, the other parts of what we bring to what we're doing in healthcare, bringing it together, that it's both and.
mm-hmm. Right.
And what's really fascinating to me, because no one's brought this up, which is really interesting because it's like it's like the elephant in the room. Because we're women, traditionally nursing has been a women's profession.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we haven't been able to, we've stepped into our place courageously, but how do we honor the nature of the nurturing aspect of nursing with the scientific masculine model? And what I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, what you said is it's happening right now in this present moment. What's going on right now is how we step forward, and the science is not even caught up to help us solve this problem that we're facing today.
Well, that's because we recognize and honor them equally and don't tie them to gender. Remember the first nurse, I believe the first nurse to die in the COVID epidemic was
Right? Oh, really?
a man in New York City, was the first nurse in the United States to die. There's no gender, there's no racial,
Right.
We had in order for us to achieve this, I don't know what you want to call it, next phase,
Right.
we have to focus on, divorce those values, the value of nurturing and caring and the emotional and all of that. We have to divorce that from any preconceived notions that this is a related to being a woman or
Right.
a person of color or anything like that.
Okay.
Likewise, the science anybody can provide the science. And until we can free ourselves, really,
Right.
until we can free ourselves of those preconceived notions about who is doing this versus that,
Okay.
and who's more valuable, this or that, we
Right.
won't be able to we won't be able to go into what the world needs.
So what the world needs is an integration.
Yes, it's it's this holistic idea, the holistic belief of the whole person. There's holistic and there's uniqueness, and everybody has a unique contribution to make. And it takes a certain degree of courage and bravery, first of all, to know what you're all about. It takes a level of maturity and sometimes honesty about what you are and what you're not.
Right.
And then that decision to say, well, here's what I am, and this is going to be good enough in this situation to do this. So I think that everyone has a unique contribution to meet the needs in the way that they that they're that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think this time is the time where I feel like the integration is happening. It must be, because it's an unprecedented time in the world right now, and things are changing.
Well, as our problems become more complex,
Right.
as our society becomes more complex, as we gain more scientific knowledge about our world and the complexity and the interdependence,
Right.
it becomes crystal clear that unless we're integrated, unless we tackle these complex problems in an integrated fashion, we will never solve them.
Right.
We
And what
just,
are the steps we need to take as an individual? What are the steps you think, just, as we're coming to the end, what do you see some of the steps that we can take to become into that integration?
well, don't get too comfortable.
That's for sure.
Don't get too comfortable doing what you've always done. Don't get too comfortable. That's the courage. Don't get too comfortable doing what you've always done. Take a good hard look at the situation and a good hard look at you, and then say, well, looks like I've got to go out and get another tool for the toolbox. And that doesn't feel good when you get to be the dean of a college of nursing, or you think you've arrived at a certain level. Uh,
Right.
so don't get too comfortable and be humble. So it's interesting to me when I think about these notions that courage and humility are inextricably linked. So courage
Yes.
without humility is probably arrogance
Yes.
or foolishness. It could be foolishness too.
Wow.
If you don't have that balance of courage and humility, um, you can't achieve what you were put on this earth to achieve.
Wow. That's so true. Thank you so much. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you
Oh,
and how much I appreciate you taking the time to do this telesummit. And I really feel totally inspired by you, because you are definitely shifted my life and helped me figure out and honor the expansions that I've gone through, and I have felt seen by you, and I have felt that you have this tremendous capacity to share what needs to be named. And this interview was just remarkable. You named the courage, you name what we need to do. And I think as we move into the future, truly people with your expertise, your experience, your humility, your sense of always growing and never getting too comfortable is exactly the things that we need to do as we walk through the storm that we're living in now and the future.
Right, right. Well,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so
Thank
much. I
you for
appreciate
this opportunity to just sort of free my thoughts about where we are and where we're going. It's been fun.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Take care.
Okay.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.